Hello and welcome. My name is Jen Glass, and I'm a writing specialist with the Writing Skills Improvement Program. And I'm here today to talk with you about writing resumes and CVs. More specifically, we will start with a short brainstorming activity. In that activity, you will describe your dream job and also brainstorm some of your biggest strengths and skills. Then we will compare the resume and the CV, taking note of some similarities and differences, and also addressing some frequently asked questions. We'll also discover that there are two options for organizing your resume, the chronological and functional, and we will see examples of both of those. We will also compare two example CVs and notice how they have arranged the information to highlight the emphasis of their experience and also the positions to which they're applying. And finally, I'll leave you with some tips and some questions for reflection and revision. So let's get started with a little bit of writing. When you're ready, take a moment to pause the video and do some writing about the following questions and prompts. Number one, what's your dream job? Describe it in words, bullets, or sentences without worrying too much about grammar and other writing conventions. Number two, list at least 3 qualities that make you a strong professional. Examples include being hardworking, collaborative, and responsible. And finally, number 3, list at least 3 valuable academic or professional skills that you currently possess. These could be language skills, coding skills, management, or leadership skills. Now that you have some ideas down, let's compare the resume and the CV. They have some key similarities. They provide concrete evidence of qualities and skills mentioned elsewhere in your application packet, for example, in your cover letter or your personal statement. They catalog the most important professional, volunteer, educational, and other relevant experiences that qualify you for a given opportunity. They should be customized for that specific opportunity and organized to highlight your biggest strengths. They should include keywords that match those in a job or opportunity's description. In the United States, at least, they should not include a photograph. And generally speaking, there's no need to include your full mailing address at the top of the document. You might include your city and state, and you might also consider providing the URL for your LinkedIn profile or a professional website. With those similarities in mind, what are some differences? The resume is much more common outside of academia in industry. However, some academic positions will also ask for a resume. A resume is typically 1 to 2 pages and no more than 2 pages in length. And it briefly lists your relevant experiences, skills, and qualifications. With that in mind, it typically includes fewer categories than a CV, and usually emphasizes work experience over other components of your background. A CV, on the other hand, is much more commonly submitted for academic and research positions, at least in the US. There is no page limit. Some CVs are many, many pages in length. And it provides a very detailed list of all relevant academic, scholarly, and professional experiences, awards, and achievements. It tends to include more categories than a resume, with an emphasis on academic background. What are some frequently asked questions that we have heard at WISIP, and how can we respond to those? How can I customize for each opportunity? This is a very common and very reasonable question to ask. Keywords can be integrated into your professional summary, skills summary, or profile section toward the top of your document. You can also order the elements within your resume or CV to really highlight those skills and qualifications that match those within the description of the opportunity. And you can even, to some extent, pick and choose the content that you share, which jobs, which experiences you include. A related question is, do I need to include all of my educational work history? And the answer is not necessarily. Try to focus on what's applicable to the given opportunity, but in a CV, use that space to be more thorough and more comprehensive. How can I make every word count? You may have heard the term active verbs. These are verbs that describe actions you take in your professional roles, such as manage, analyze, publish, and so on. Those verbs pack a lot of punch. They carry a lot of meaning. And in addition to using those verbs, these documents typically use bullet points rather than paragraphs or sentences to express your experience. You can also arrange the information to highlight your strengths, and we will see some examples of that on the next few slides. What if I don't have very much experience and I'm struggling to find content for my document? Cast a wide net. Focus on relevant coursework, volunteering, conference attendance, professional development opportunities, anything that you have experienced, that you have participated in, that will help you show what you know how to do. And if you are writing a resume, you might consider a functional format. And we'll take a look at one of those in just a moment. Here are two formatting options for your resume side by side. On the left is Amy Hernandez's chronological resume. The reason this is an example of a chronological format is that under the work history heading, we have a detailed work history that begins today with her current position as an event planner and traces back to her very first marketing position in 2013. Some other things to notice. Amy has provided a professional summary that includes keywords that are very likely to appeal to marketing executives. In addition to the word marketing, she has included successful campaigns, collaborating, social media, and so on. She's also listed some of her skills toward the bottom and has included her education history, but it isn't really the emphasis because the professional skills and work history are more important. By contrast, on the right, we have Keith Bell's functional resume. In this resume, you'll notice there is still a professional summary with some important keywords like woodworking and repair work. But that is followed not by a work history in reverse chronological order. Instead, Keith has a very fleshed out section called professional skills, in which he has described the many things that he knows how to do that fall under the umbrella of carpentry, woodworking, and even construction. That serves him well because his work history is pretty limited. If you look towards the bottom, there are only 2 positions listed. The professional skills catch the eye of the employer and show that Keith has many skills to offer, even if he has that limited work history. If you, like Keith, have a limited history in the marketplace, you might consider a functional resume. And the same is true if you have an interrupted work history. For example, if you took a break from the workforce to raise a family, and now you're returning and seeking employment. Let's talk a little bit more about the CV. The CV has no maximum length, and it includes all relevant details that would appeal to an academic or scholarly audience. That said, if you are currently an undergraduate, graduate student, postgraduate, faculty member, or other adult professional, you probably don't need to include anything that predates your undergrad years. In a CV, just like in a resume, there should be an emphasis on areas that are of interest to the employer or the institution to which you're applying. You might emphasize research, teaching, grant funding, and so on. There is flexibility in terms of how you order those elements, and just like in a resume, often the applicant will place the most applicable skills or areas of experience towards the top. Typical sections within a CV include education, teaching and/or research experience, publications, conference presentations, honors and awards, and service. Some also choose to include their references at the bottom of a CV. This is not typically done any longer with a resume, but in a CV, you may include references. However, please contact them first and make sure that they're comfortable being listed. Here is a snapshot of a CV by applicant Rachel Green. This is not the entirety of her document, and it is much more thorough than this snapshot may imply. However, I wanted to draw your attention to something about the way in which she has organized the information. Notice that education is really a highlight toward the top of the document, and just beneath the education section is a quite detailed teaching and advising section. Rachel does include research experience, publications, and conference presentations, among other themes. But placing the teaching and advising toward the top implies that this is the type of position that she is applying for and that she is very well suited to. So institutions that are expecting their faculty to teach a number of courses would really be drawn to this CV. In this contrasting example, the applicant is probably applying for a more research-oriented position. We can infer that right away by the fact that although they have placed education towards the top, no teaching experience appears within the first few sections. Instead, there's an emphasis on awards, publications, presentations, and especially research experience. So this CV would probably appeal to an institution that is hiring someone to be a researcher or to be a faculty member with a research focus. Now that we've seen several examples and talked about some tips, it's time to take stock of what you already have. If you have a draft of your resume, notice the length. Is it 1 to 2 pages long, or do you perhaps need to cut some length? If it's very short, could you expand? If it is a CV, are there any academic experiences you could add to flesh it out? What are the skills that your draft currently emphasizes? And are there any additional skills that you would like to emphasize more than you currently do? Have you asked someone else to share their feedback? Consider asking someone specifically to identify the qualities and skills that come through to them in your draft. They may also have great suggestions about possible changes, but primarily we want them to weigh in on those strengths that are really emerging and shining through your document. And finally, as a last step, have you carefully proofread for any issues with conventions, typos, misspellings, punctuation issues, formatting, or other concerns? I hope that you've enjoyed our workshop today and that you've received some valuable tips that will help you move forward with your job market search.